Welcome to Week 2, Chapter 3. In this chapter, we're going to build upon the knowledge that we learned in Chapter 2, which is basic chemistry, applying that now to the chemistry of life. So here we have several views of the same molecule, glucose. Glucose is a carbohydrate. It's actually the simplest of all carbohydrates, called a monosaccharide, because it's built upon one sugar unit. Mono means one, saccharide for sugar. And you can see in all of these views, A through E, it's all the same molecule. It's all glucose. It's just there are different ways of representing glucose in two-dimensional or in textbooks. The first view of glucose we can see on the screen here. And in this view of glucose, we're looking at a structural formula, which shows the atoms and the bonds. So the atoms are represented by letters, C for carbon, O for oxygen, H for hydrogen, and the lines represent covalent bonds. Glucose's molecular formula is C6H12O6, which means there are 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. That's where the formula C6H12O6 comes from. In this formula, we can see the structural formula from before, but it's abbreviated and it omits atoms such as carbon from the corners of the ringed structure. So everywhere you see a point in the ring to the left, you would have a carbon atom. You can still see represented the carbon that is outside of the sugar in the molecule to the left at the top, represented as CH2OH. That carbon is outside of the carbon ring, but the points of the ring at the top, the sides, the bottom, and the bottom side also have carbon atoms. So it's still C6H12O6, it's just an abbreviated form. And this is the ringed structure of carbon, missing all of the carbon atoms at the points of the ring. To the right, we see the same representation of glucose, but it's even in a more simplistic form. We've removed all of the carbon atoms, we've removed all of the oxygen atoms except the one that's in the ring, and we've removed all the hydrogen atoms. So this one is a greatly abbreviated form. Once you get familiar with the structure of glucose, this one is easy to notice, especially once you get to know what carbohydrates are. And all carbohydrates are built on simple sugars or monosaccharides, which glucose is a monosaccharide. It's a 6-carbon sugar. Here's another view of the same molecule, glucose. And in this view, we're looking at what's called a ball and stick model. And this shows the arrangement of the atoms in a 3-dimensional structure. And we looked at this in week 2 with the molecule of water. So carbon is represented by the black sphere, oxygen is by the red, and hydrogen is by the gray. And then the tubes that connect the molecules are the covalent bonds. So this one gives us more of a spatial relationship of how the atoms are bonded to each other. And then in this last view, we're looking at what's called a space-filling model, which shows the molecule's overall shape and how it's actually probably 3-dimensionally accurately represented, where the black internal pieces are all the carbons, and then we don't really see one carbon from the next carbon, although they are separate, but they're very closely bonded together. And then on the outside of the ring, we see our oxygens and our hydrogens. This is just a slide illustrating some of the different types of elements and their representation that you'll see throughout the textbook. Carbon is black. Sphere, hydrogen is a whitish gray sphere. Oxygen is a red. Nitrogen is a blue. And phosphorus is a yellow. So as we build on molecules to make larger molecules, which are called macromolecules, one thing that scientists noticed was what are called functional groups. And in essence, what a functional group is it's a group of atoms that behave similarly no matter what molecule they are in. So once they started recognizing these patterns, of course, they had to name them and come up with characteristics and notice their location. And as you can see on this chart from the locations, we have amino acids, which build up and make proteins. We have fatty acids, which are a type of lipid. We have sugars, which are simplistic carbohydrates. And then we have nucleotides, which belong to our fourth macromolecule, nucleic acids. So within this table, we have all four macromolecules represented, or their building blocks. And we see over to the left group, those are the names given for the functional groups that are prevalent in the macromolecules. So the functional group hydroxyl is always an oxygen covalently bonded to a hydrogen. Because of the nature of the hydrogen bound to the oxygen being more electronegative or being able to hold on to the electrons in the covalent bond between the oxygen and the hydrogen, it creates a polar covalent bond. So the OH, or the hydroxyl group, is polar, and it is found in amino acids, sugars, and alcohols. So that means amino acids, sugars, and alcohols have a polar characteristic imparted by this hydroxyl group. The methyl group is a carbon with 3 hydrogen atoms, so it's a CH3 group. And the methyl group, the bonds between the carbon and the hydrogen are not polar because they're equally spread across the carbon, so the electrons are equally shared. So the characteristic that is prevalent with methyl groups and in the larger molecules that methyl groups are found is nonpolarity, which means not soluble in water. And this is found with fatty acids and some amino acid side chains. The third functional group represented in this chart is the carbonyl group. And the carbonyl group is represented by, or recognized, by carbon double bonded to oxygen. Now, if the carbon double bonded to oxygen is at the end of a molecule, it will also have a hydrogen bound to it. If it is in the middle of the molecule, it will not. So the aldehyde is the carbonyl group bound at the end of a molecule, whereas a ketone is a carbonyl group bound in the middle of the molecule. The carbonyl group, because it's a carbon with a double bonded oxygen, is polar, and that means it's hydrophilic and it's very reactive. It's located in sugars, amino acids, and nucleotides. The carboxyl group, also commonly called carboxylic acid, is a group that is made up of the carbon double bonded to an oxygen and then single bound to an oxygen, which is single bound to a hydrogen. In a cell, which is made up of mostly water, and water we know is polar, that carboxyl group will become ionized, and the hydrogen will be liberated and given to the solution. That means that hydrogen ions are added to the solution, which means our pH will become lower in numerical value, which means the solution will become acidic. So the carboxyl group's characteristic is acidic. Since it is acidic and it is charged, you can see in the ionized picture it carries a negative charge. It is polar, and it will impart polarity to that portion of the molecule to which it is bound, meaning that portion of the molecule will be hydrophilic. And you can find the carboxyl group prevalent in fatty acids, amino acids, and carbohydrates. Kind of the opposite of the carboxyl group is the amine group. And the amine group, instead of liberating hydrogen ions in water, when it ionizes, it accepts hydrogen ions. So it pulls hydrogen ions out of an aqueous medium or out of water. And because it is doing that, that means it makes the pH numerical value become a higher number, let's say from 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 or 9 to 10. So it's considered to be basic. And it is prevalent or located in amino acids and in nucleic acids, specifically making up some of the nucleotide bases. It would also contribute polarity to the molecule and make the portion of the molecule to which it is attached hydrophilic. Recall, hydrophilic is water-loving and hydrophobic is water-fearing. If a substance is charged or polar, it is hydrophilic, or at least that portion where that charge is, or that polarity is hydrophilic. If a substance is nonpolar, it is hydrophobic, or again, that portion where that group is, that is nonpolar, will make that portion of that molecule to which it is attached nonpolar. Our